Emmanuel is actually going to talk about contextualizing stakeholder management in community development. And he's the Communications Manager, Coastal Development Authority in Ghana. We were just having a quick chat about that role, which I think is quite a challenging and complex role. And he brings a community development perspective into that role. So over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very privileged to be here this afternoon to share my perspective, especially from a community development practitioner's angle. And then during my presentation, I hope I can raise some pertinent questions that hopefully Laurie in her subsequent presentation may address or lead us to some possible answers. For want of time, I'd like to proceed straight away to my presentation. So the title of my presentation is contextualizing stakeholder management in community development. And this is the outline. We'll have an introduction where we'll look at a few terms on the issues that we're going to discuss today. And then we move on to the next step where we'll try to situate stakeholder management, particularly engagement and participation in the community development research process. Then we will look at some of the challenges of effectively engaging or managing stakeholder relationships in the community development research process. And hopefully we can draw some conclusions that can set the stage for Laurie's presentation. And of course, our open discussion and how we should proceed going forward in these undertakings. So let's start with the introduction. When we talk about stakeholder management, we all know it's a very broad term. And for a group of researchers, would like to narrow things down. And like I said, for want of time, we are going to look at it from the angles of stakeholder engagement and participation. We all know a stakeholder is someone who is affected or affects a particular intervention or a particular project. Yes, and we are talking in the context of community development. And we are trying to see how the relationships that we build with these people we call stakeholders, the relationships we build with them, with the people who are affected by the community development research work, or people who can affect the outcome of community development research, can be situated within the community development research process. And so, yes, let me state that the theoretical underpinnings of what I am going to say today will be, first of all, the IACD guidelines, which spells out how community development practice should be done anywhere in the world. And so that will be one of the core sources of some of the statements I'll make. Then I'll also be relying on an article in the Philippine Journal of Social Development, 2015, volume 7, specifically an article by Teresa V. Tungapalan, PhD, and Aleli B. Bawagan, PhD. The title of the article is Community Development Research, Emerging Concepts, Methods, and Practices. And so this will form the theoretical basis of what I'll say. And of course, I will come in with what I know or what I've experienced as a community person who has worked with, for instance, the Millennium Cities Initiative, a team from Columbia University, to formulate a community upgrading profile for Polygonal as part of the Millennium Development goals, you know, the intervention exercises by the Millennium Cities Initiative. So when we say engagement, the whole idea of engagement, as I would like to put it, is captured firmly by the IACD guidelines, specifically in theme 2, where it says engaging with communities. Essentially, engagement is all about the relationships that we build with the people we work with, the people who can affect the work and the people who are affected by the work. Then participation. Participation, which is also captured in theme 3 of the IACD guidelines, which is participatory planning, speaks about the roles that are assigned, or the actual roles that are played by people who are affected by our community development work, especially community development research processes, or people who can affect the community development research process. So engagement is about the relationships we build with these people, and the participation is about the roles that these people play in the process. So what is community development research? Of course, there is a little information from from scholars, and also based on the journal that I mentioned. But essentially, from where I see, 3 things must define or must characterize any community development research process. First of all, it must be participatory. And this issue of participation is also well captured in the theme, which is bringing together diverse stakeholders in community development research. Once we bring people together, they are going to do certain things, and so participation. And so we are saying that community development is a or must have a participatory approach. So we're saying that participatory research is closely linked with social action and community organizing. Participatory research has 3 major components: conscientization. While it may just be a fact-finding or a research work for the community development practitioner, for the stakeholder, it is work. And so for the stakeholder, anything that can be achieved through the community development research in actual, naturality must be actually achieved. So we say that as part of its participatory method, there must be some conscientization through the research work of the stakeholders. There has to be capacity building of the stakeholders or the stakeholder group that are involved in the process. And the research work itself, as participatory as it should be, must result in specific action towards social change. So one of the key features of community development research is it seeks to create wider opportunities for grassroots participation in the development process in general, and in knowledge production in particular. Then community development research must also lead or must revolve around the actions of people, how community, these stakeholders, when they are managed well in relationships and in roles that are assigned to them or that they take upon themselves, how they can take specific action. I mean, even in the context of ABCD, using local assets and local resources to change their situation. So the research, community development research process is another opportunity, or must have the feature that incorporates people's action. So that is also a form of action research, and it's a major category in social research that highlights the problem-solving function of research. It involves a complex process of observation, reflection, action to seek solutions to practical issues. So the action component is commonly associated with the group action and social change of the stakeholders for their communities. Then community development research must necessarily result in social transformation. It is not just a theoretical exercise. It is something that must, has even been captured very well under the IACD guidelines, which clearly shows in this quote that to be truly transformative, community development practice needs our heads, hands, and hearts, with our practice underpinned by an organized body of knowledge that is in turn informed by practice and research. So community development research must be participatory, must revolve around people's action, and must lead to social transformation. So here I am just showing, an excerpt from the IACD guidelines, which are the themes and key areas of community development research practice, to prove that, yes, the IACD itself has captured, all the aspects that I've just mentioned. when we go through these key practice areas, all we see actions from how we can enable or encourage action from stakeholders at the community level, how we can ensure that the community research practice or the community development research process will lead to a transformational outcomes that can help to improve the lot of a particular people in a particular community. So IACD has it all there. Then going on, how do we contextualize now that we know what some of the features of the community development research should be? How do we put it in the context of our community development research in reality? So we are saying that community development research must be applied. It must be critical social science research, which must be concerned with social issues affecting marginalized sectors and communities. Community development research must always be out there to protect the vulnerable, to give the marginalized a bigger voice. So we're saying that research is not merely used to validate standard theories, nor to interpret observations. Rather, it must function as a means to critically view reality and serve as a means to resolve social issues. So social research in general is viewed as a potent tool for marginalized groups to let their voices be heard in the development discourse. And so when we say community development research is also a critical social science research, we are saying that it applies to community development as a social research, as social research becomes a tool to interrogate and reorient the ideas as basis for taking action and changing mindsets of our people in their communities. Now we are saying that, so as we go, we need to ask ourselves these questions, that the community development research exercises that we undertake, can we say that they are actually critical social science researches that act as a potent tool for marginalized groups, not for the majority, because it's easy for the majority to have their way. It's easy for the majority to carry the vote. But we come from a perspective of pro-poor, pro-people interventionism. And so we are asking ourselves practical, real questions. Can we say that our community development research exercise that we are undertaking, or that we have undertaken, have become potent tools for marginalized groups to gain their voices? Now, it must also be transformative, reflective, and action-oriented. I just touched on the action. So we're saying community development research emanates from a pro-people standpoint. It aims to re-examine social realities as basis for transforming lives and social structures, and to reflect on people's experiences and narratives as basis for community action. The argument here is that we say that how stakeholders are managed, the relationships that we community development practitioners build, the relationships we build with these stakeholders, and the roles we allow them to play or not to play impinge directly or remotely on the transformative, reflective, or the action-oriented nature of the community development research process or its outcomes. And so we need to ask ourselves whether we are positioning ourselves well as community development practitioners or community development researchers, to ensure that the researches that we undertake are transformative, they are reflective, and they are action-oriented, and they are relevant for community action by the stakeholders based on the engagement, which is the relationships we build with them and the roles that we assign to them or that they take upon themselves to play to help the research process. Then we are saying, yes, it must, the community development research process must also be oriented towards people empowerment, which is not much different from what I've already just said, their development and their communities change. We are saying that action research must be able to mobilize people, must be able to create opportunities and things that can mobilize people or rally people around for them to take specific action based on the realities on the ground in their communities. And please, we know when we talk about communities, Even in a very small geographical place, we can have many, many communities. And that is one thing that we also need to take into consideration as community development researchers, that communities are peculiar one from another. And so as we go on, we realize that it is important for us to take each community on its own merit, based on its own dynamics, and then fashion out a research based on a very good relationship between the community development researcher and the stakeholder, and where the stakeholder is also playing a key role to advance the community development research process. So research is grounded on community needs and issues as basis for capacity building and organized group action. Research serves as a means toward community participation, local leadership development, action planning, and community development. People-oriented research emphasizes the role of people's organizations in generating and analyzing research data. This type of research is embedded in community organizing, mobilizing, and advocacy that aims to shift the center of authority and power from which knowledge is generated. We've already mentioned the need for community development research to result in the amplification of marginalized voices. So as we go on, we can look at how it also, the community development research process contributes to the community development body of knowledge in theory and in practice. Later in the presentation, we'll see how we achieve complementarity between theory and practice rather than a dichotomy. So community development research must contribute to advancing the theory and practice of community development as an academic discipline. It must aim to surface current and local development practices to rediscover and refine concepts and strategies. Are we, when we come as a development, community development practitioners with or aid, officials with humanitarian organizations, how do we relate to the people? Do we go in with the mindset that we are coming with our resources, we know better than the local people? Do we have issues of inferiority or superiority complex? Because these stakeholders, they may be poor and they may be looking for help. And so when you come, they will have no interest in arguing with you. Whatever you say, they'll do it. But we as community development practitioners, as professionals, we are asking ourselves that the way we do it, does it truly contribute to the community development body of knowledge? Do we have to do things differently? These are some. We are saying that community development can also lead to improved development policies, programs, and practice. Then, so we're saying more than beyond the theory building, community development research must be used to make a difference in people's lives by influencing the policies, programs, and practices that affect their development. Then what are the challenges of effective stakeholder management in community development? Like I said, complementarity between theory and practice. What are some of the methodological issues with regards to this complementarity between theory and practice? How can we say to ourselves that we are prioritizing people's well-being in the formulation of community development research? When I say that, I'm saying it in the context of stakeholder management. Are we creating the right relationships? Are we getting the people, the stakeholders, the right roles to play? Because community development research concerning the stakeholder may be looked at from two angles. In this case, I mean, the stakeholder may be a subject of the inquiry or the research, or a co-researcher, which means that the stakeholder may be the one we want to get the information from, or maybe part of the research team. So based on the relationship and the specific role of the stakeholder, we should know whether we are prioritizing people's well-being and whether we are doing something that will result in a potential developmental agenda as a research concern, as a research objective, as research questions. So proper research is pursued within the parameters set by scientific process, of course. And it must have come in with some critical perspectives, but reality must not be lost on us. Methodological rigor is required to influence policy and program advocacy and reforms. So secondly, we are saying that community development research must create spaces for marginalized voices and narratives to be heard. Can we say that there is complementarity on this front between the theory and practice? Yes, we have all the nice theories, but in practice, are we able to practicalize it What it also comes back to the issue of mindset that I mentioned. How do we approach these things, the relationships and the roles that we assign to these people when we go to their communities to go and undertake community development research? And of course, research is quite a broad term, but we all know that we can narrow it down. But even on a general note, how do we address these things? Okay. So then, secondly, we apart from the methodological issues, there is cultural and religious factors. If you come to some sub-Saharan African countries, the elder is always right. And so if you are putting stakeholders together to, let's say, study youth development or some issue that revolve around relationship between the youth and elderly in the context of development, we should realize that if the elder is there, the youth may not be able to say their mind, yes, as they would love to. So how do we navigate some of these things? This is just one of the many examples of how cultural or religious factors may affect. And so how, the chief or the traditional leader as a traditional authority, what relationship are we going to build? And what relationship do we also build with the youth groups? How do we assign them roles so that we'll be able to amplify the voices that we need to amplify, so that we can be able to create the levels of equality or egalitarianism that we need, so that no one feels marginalized in playing their role or in interacting with the community development practitioner in terms of its relationship. So we are always saying engagement and participation of the stakeholder is crucial to the community development research process. Then political interference, a quick example to explain that. If you go to some places in Sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps other places in the world, and you want to study a particular variable in a particular community within the context of community development research, and let's say you meet the elected official and you say, oh, you met the elected officials, so they should help you to select your stakeholders or do certain specific things. If you are not careful, they may only select people from only their political side, and then you will not have views, or because they may not be very tolerant of dissenting views. And so how do we navigate these waters of political interference so that, for instance, when we say we are putting stakeholders together, which includes elected officials and other political actors, how do we ensure that political interference does not become a hindrance to the effective management of stakeholder in the community development research process? Then I was talking about mindset a few minutes ago. What mindset do we come in? Do we come in with a mindset that we are superior because we have the Western concepts or the theories, the constructs? No. Or do we go in as people who are going as partners, or who empathize with the stakeholders, and in building relationships, we try to bring them up, show up, like we said, in capacity building, their understanding. Now, the stakeholders themselves, like I mentioned, do they always speak up? Do they dissent from the view of the research practitioner, because they feel that, yes, we are in our community and we can give you a better quality of information? How do we even do literature review? What sources do we rely on? So we are saying that sometimes the mindset and the approach in the context of superiority and inferiority complexes within the context of Westernized concepts can affect how stakeholder management affects community development research. Then, of course, the legal and governance environment may also affect how stakeholders participate in community development research. A lack of critical awareness and understanding by government agencies of the importance of participation in community-based development programs to implement the bottom-up perspective rather than the traditional top-down can also affect the outcomes of community development research. And like we said, community development research must always necessarily result in action that is transformative and that improves the lives of the stakeholders and the community. So that is also very captured very nicely in the IACD guidelines, specifically themes common across community development practice around the world. So what's the conclusion? We are saying that, yes, we must try to achieve indigenization of concepts, and we must try to achieve collaboration because it enhances participation of these stakeholders and highlight their active ownership of the project rather than being passive beneficiaries. So community development research should act as a strategy for capacity building, especially among these marginalized groups, and anchored on community development practice, knowledge, and skills. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of my brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Emmanuel. That was a real tour de force, actually. You got an awful lot into that short presentation. It's given us a lot of food for thought, I think, and really highlighted the key role of research in community development that it can play in quite a radical way. So I'm now going to pass on to Laurie, who is going to pick up from where Emmanuel left off, I think, and talk about the potential for meditative inquiry as an approach to learning in community to enhance diverse stakeholder relationships, engagement, and community development. Lessons from her PhD research, I think. So, Laurie, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say what a joy it's been to work with Emmanuel on developing this presentation from a couple of different perspectives around the world. We actually just met in the Researchers Forum the last session, so we didn't know each other before then. And then we've now had several conversations as we were preparing this presentation to make sure that we were not just doing individual presentations, but that our presentations would be complementary to each other. So before I get started, one of the things that is very important in Canada these days is to do a land acknowledgement in relation to where one lives and works on unceded territory within North America. So I respectfully acknowledge that I live and work in Mi'kma'ki, part of the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I support the goals of the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission and of reconciliation in general. The purpose of my presentation will be to share some learnings from my research as a PhD candidate in educational studies, which is maybe a bit of a different lens. I've also been a community development practitioner for over 30 years. So I do have a long history as a community development practitioner as well. And I came to my work through the lens of journalism, and then I did a master's in adult education and community development, and then now doing a PhD in educational studies. And in particular, what I'm focusing on these days, or what is really getting me excited, is this idea of meditative inquiry that was pioneered by a professor of mine as an approach to learning and engagement in general in community and social movements. Just to get started, first thing I'm going to do is invite you to just take a deep breath and to breathe a couple of deep breaths to just sort of ground yourself. That was a lot of information that came from Emmanuel, and then I'm going to be adding more on top. So meditative inquiry is very much about grounding yourself. And I also want to start by asking a question and encouraging everyone to reflect on either that question or on some of the points that Emmanuel brought up, and to just put your thoughts in the chat, either if it's a thought or a question or an observation or something you're thinking about that's new for you, to just put those in the chat. And I will note right now, Sarah, I can't see the chat because I'm presenting, but I'll be excited to look at the chat when I'm done presenting, and maybe we can highlight a couple of things maybe that come out of that chat. And the question I want to pose is, how would you describe the typical process of creating change or doing community development work wherever you are? And I think it's a key part of what Emmanuel was trying to get at. And I'm asking this question partly as a way to reflect again on what Emmanuel has already presented on, but also to model what I will be talking about in my presentation related to the research I'm doing around engagement of various diverse stakeholders and learning in community. For me, creating change in community often involves a lot of conflict. A lot of people say, I think we should do this or that, and they push for others to do things the way they think they should be done. Meditative inquiry is an alternative approach to engaging with oneself and others, compared to this typical pushing or push approach, or this the idea of debates, the idea of competition of ideas, the idea of argument. It is not about convincing others of a particular point of view or way of doing things. It is about making space for reflection and inquiry together to figure out the best way to address some of the most complex issues of our time. Is an approach to learning and engagement that was pioneered by a professor of mine, Dr. Ashwani Kumar, who is based at Mount St. Vincent University in Nova Scotia, Canada. And the website noted on this slide has much more information about his work, or if you just Google meditative inquiry and Dr. Kumar, it should probably come up. And there is a wealth of recordings, and this is his latest book. There's an edited collection of different approaches to meditative inquiry. The research that has been done by Dr. Kumar and others so far has mainly focused on how meditative inquiry could be used to improve education and learning for elementary, high school, and university or post-secondary students. In my research as a PhD candidate, I'm looking to apply meditative inquiry as an approach to engagement and learning in community and in community development work. I'm not proposing that meditative inquiry is the only way to do things, but I do wonder what could happen if we started to implement some of the ideas of meditative inquiry more in how we do community development and how we engage with various stakeholders in community. At the core of meditative inquiry is the idea that it is only when the mind is free from the old that it meets everything anew. And in that, there is joy. Both meditative inquiry and the ideas of compassionate listening ask us to pause before we speak. They invite us to make space to invite others to speak and to suspend immediate judgment of what they are saying, and for us to really try to understand where they are coming from, and to listen not just with our heads and minds, but with our hearts. If we could do this for others, maybe it would encourage them to do the same for us. Maybe we could then put aside our own ideas, our own perspectives, to explore ideas and perspectives that we could only develop by working together, by inquiring together, with an openness we seldom see, maybe, in our work. An openness in our minds, but as I said, also in our hearts, our bodies even, and with all that we are. And this work is really grounded in very much in the ideas of Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was an Indian philosopher and educator. Dr. Ashwani Kumar is from India, and for many years he wanted to explore the work of Jiddu Krishnamurti, and was kind of stumped when he was in India. He was actually told, no, everything was about the West. And it was only when he came to the University of British Columbia to do his doctoral work that he was actually told, yes, do whatever, dive into whatever you want to dive into. And so he really went into the ideas of Jiddu Krishnamurti, and also MacDonald, who was another curriculum theorist that he looked at very closely. I just want to note that I get that some people may say these ideas are too idealistic, fanciful even, fairy tales, or only of myth and legend. And many may feel so because we are so unused to practicing this approach to engaging with others and doing community development. Many may say what I'm proposing is very out there. How practical could this be? We don't have a name for this. We need to fix things now, or we don't have time for this. We need to fix things now, right? Like we're always in a rush, right? But what I would say is, though we have what we have been doing and the way we have been engaging with each other doesn't seem to be working very well. Certainly not at the level we need it to work at, and in the time that we have. Our planet is in crisis. Many people and cultures are in crisis because of that. Here in Nova Scotia, we've had massive fires that we've never had before. Our water table is low, our wells are low. We are experiencing things that nobody would ever have thought. Everybody thought Nova Scotia was a pretty safe place, and we have been in crisis. So it is everywhere. So I believe we need a new way to engage with each other, to explore new ideas, to address some of the most complex challenges in communities, in our society that we're really struggling with. If we don't try something new, if we don't try new ways of engaging with each other, we will never know what difference they could have in how we do our work. And again, I'm not saying meditative inquiry as an approach is the answer to everything. I have only started my research, but I feel there is tremendous promise in the ideas of Krishnamurti and Dr. Kumar and others exploring this approach to learning and engagement in community and in society. And this way of being and learning together is not new. We know how to do this. Many cultures have customs, rituals, and processes to help communities come together. Those of us steeped in Western culture can learn a lot from other cultures, other ways of being together, other ways of exploring together, other ways of making decisions together. In Canada, we are trying to walk the path of reconciliation. This means listening to Indigenous people, hearing their stories, hearing the harm that was done to them, and then trying to find a way forward together. There is much in the world that needs to be done to heal the impacts of colonization, slavery, and other forms of harm, including, as I mentioned, that being done to the planet. This work is not easy, but we know at the core of our being, in our bodies, in the very cells and matter that make us part of everything, we know what we really need to do. We just need to make the space for ourselves and with others to really listen to ourselves and others, not just with our ears or our minds, but with everything that we are. When we truly connect with ourselves and others at that level, then we will find the answers that we need. So Walalia is the Mi'kmaq way to say thank you to several people. Walalin is to say thank you to an individual person. So to honor the land of Turtle Island, as the Indigenous people of North America refer to North America, and the people of that land I live and work on, I say Walalia and thank you.
Well, I shall say Walalin to you, Laurie, and thank you very much indeed for that very concise but very stimulating presentation. And I think it's quite nice to slow us down a little bit and think if we do have a whole range of diverse and maybe conflicting stakeholders and different people with different perspectives, different ideals, different demands who wish to engage in research, how do we listen? How do we start? How do we build a way of developing good relationships for working together for the transformation that Emmanuel was highlighting? So thank you both very much indeed. I think we've got a lot of food for thought there. So I'll now invite our participants. You'll see we just had one comment in the chat, Laurie, which was about firstly listening to people, which I think is vitally important. That's a very good starting point. So reflections, comments from you. Please feel free to raise your hand either by using the Zoom hand raiser or waving your hand at me. I can hopefully see everybody, or you can put something in the chat. So who would like to start off with any comments or reflections.
So I just see a great presentations from Daniel. So thank you very much, Daniel, from both Emmanuel and I. As I mentioned, it was a really great opportunity for two of us from very different places in the world to work together for this. Yes,
KK.
Yeah, sorry that I definitely missed very important lessons from Emmanuel's presentation, but I just try to think of whether at Emmanuel and also the second presenter, whether you could, both of you could advise us on the conventional understanding about community development relating to respecting each other's, promoting participation of members of the community members throughout the development process. Because our conventional understanding is we will try to find ways to involve them. The new ideas about, say, meditative inquiry and also management of the different stakeholders. How do these two ways, advise us add on our conventional understanding of respect and facilitating involvement of different community members throughout the development process?
Okay, so I think a couple of things. One, we often move too fast. We don't take the time to slow down and reflect on our own position within community and our own experiences and our own ideas, and then to bracket those ideas, right? To one, really make sure we understand ourselves and where we're coming from, and in context of then relating to others. And meditative inquiry is very much about grounding yourself first, both as a practitioner, but also as a member of community. And then the other thing I would mention is that's very significant from a theoretical perspective is Dr. Kumar actually critiques critical pedagogy a bit and Freire's consensitization, in that he believes it doesn't go far enough. It's very focused on, in his view, on a structural approach to change, so changing structures. But if we don't start with the individuals and understanding where individuals are coming from as stakeholders and where ourselves as well are coming from, we can't really affect. We are the ones who create structures, right? So if we don't have a really deep understanding of ourselves and of each other, before we start trying to go at creating change in community, then are we really doing what needs to be done? Are we really coming up with the best ideas to make things better in some way in community? So that is a key theoretical criticism and positioning of Dr. Kumar in relationship to how he thinks about meditative inquiry, that we have to start with individual understanding of ourselves, of our consciousness, of our biases, of our perspectives, and encourage people in community to be able to have space to do that kind of reflection as well, before we can actually then look to change structures in our communities and society in ways that will actually make things better.
Laurie, you'll see Daniel has put a question in the chat, which does kind of link to that. And Daniel, I don't know whether you want to speak it, if you've got the mic available. You can speak your question, otherwise I'll repeat it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Laurie, for the explanation you're giving, where we need to start with the individual, and the individual needs to understand where they're located within the community, so that now they can ultimately go out and basically start impacting on the wider community. But equally also want to appreciate that the communities are more about what is collectively agreed upon. Most of the time, the individual is a function and a product of a society, which in some cases may not give that individual that much space. And so that, to a large extent, creates a problem for me. How do we get this individual who is so much a product of society and most of the time operates from a minimalistic perspective to ultimately come out and create a process of social transformation? Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that at all, Laurie?
Just, yeah, and I would say another part of my work, research work, that I'm another area that I'm very intrigued with is the emerging theoretical area around posthumanism, and how actually posthumanism as an approach to looking at where we could go together, and Rosie Bradati's ideas around affirmative ethics. For me, I'm really intrigued how posthumanism and its recognition of the value of multiple perspectives, and then how we work together to incorporate those perspectives. I think meditative inquiry and that emerging field of theory of posthumanism could be very complementary. So that is another piece of in terms of theory and research that I'm looking to look at is how those two things together could really enhance learning in community, engagement in community, community development practice.
And I'm going to come back to some other people in chat, but carrying on this thread, Kevin, I see you've talked about psychological change as key to community development. Would you like to expand on that a little bit more if you can?
Yeah, only in the sense that people gaining an understanding of themselves and their role in the process of change is very important. I think in some of the work we do in the South Wales valleys, there's very much that sort of, as somebody described it, as a stone wall, where people don't believe they can actually create change. And again, Daniel mentioned political interference, and we know very much what that is here. With different agendas, political agendas driving certain development agendas, which may come from Welsh government, or it could come from local authority, or whatever that happens to be. And then people feel that they are being told what to do rather than being enabled to be doing what they want to do. And I think it's very important that you have a change of mindset, a psychological change, so they're able actually to believe in themselves, to move that forward. And I think the meditative inquiry could be quite useful in that regard.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. And I think it kind of links with Emmanuel's presentation. I'm afraid I think Emmanuel must have lost his connection, because I can't see him in the room. I hope he may rejoin us, because it's a shame he's not getting the benefit of the questions. But his theme was very much, wasn't it, about bringing together people for collective action for transformation. And we in community development we can get very taken up with community organizing and achieving targets strategically, but maybe going at a slower pace to build up the relationships and to strengthen the relationships. But I suppose in the West, I think Daniel's quite right, isn't he, that we still focus on the individual. I think, oh, meditation is when I go off on my own and I shut my eyes and I connect, or I don't connect. I just try to blank the screen. Whereas in the community development case, we're preparing really, and we're connecting with ourselves, our environment, other human beings, other parts of the natural world, to then move on to try to work for change. And I think it's quite interesting and challenging for us, isn't it, to try and link those two, that although we know in community development of the links between the psychological and the social, often we do divide them, and we get very utilitarian in our push to achieve change, because there is an urgency, of course, isn't there? As Laurie said, we are faced with war, with climate change. These things, we need to do something about them soon. And what can be the strategies? And there's some other comments in the chat, Laurie, which you may have seen, some very positive comments.
And I was just going to offer actually a practical example of how I also have a research grant to work with an organization called iMove, In My Own Voice Arts Association, which is a Black-led organization based in Halifax that works with people who are incarcerated, have been incarcerated, or at risk of incarceration because they are racialized and marginalized. And one of the things we've been trying to do is we just finished a grant from the Department of Justice in Nova Scotia, and then that grant ended and we're trying to find new money, right? One of the things that we're doing is not just looking to apply to different programs, we're looking to have a conversation about what is justice, and ask that question and engage with the various departments, the Department of Justice, Health, Culture, Education within the provincial government, to have a conversation about, to actually ask the question, what is justice? What is their perspective on justice? How might different individuals look at the concept of justice? And by using a process of co-inquiry, not trying to say it should be this or it should be that, but actually engaging in a process of co-inquiry, we hope to shift the conversation. We also hope to find new support for the work that iMove is doing, but also work that others in the field with the Decade of People of African Descent Coalition in Nova Scotia, who are doing very valuable work as well. So this idea of co-inquiry and reflection individually as well as a group, and then as a different approach, an alternative approach to just trying to push a certain perspective on other people, is really at the heart of what I'm looking to spend time really looking at deeply.
Oh, a question from Henry. Would you like to put your mic on and ask the question, Henry? Or if not, I'll ask it.
Thank you very much. The question is directed to Laurie. First of all, Laurie, a very big thanks for your presentation and Emmanuel's. I think it was very, very insightful for us. My question is about meditative inquiry. My understanding of it is more along the lines of meditation in general. So my question is whether you've been able to identify indigenous forms of meditative inquiry from different parts of the world. And if so, whether you'll be willing to share a bit on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to hint at towards the end of my presentation, is that this is not new, right? And when I think of meditative inquiry and the way I was engaged with meditative inquiry by Dr. Kumar in one of my PhD courses, it was really about, it's not a prescriptive approach to meditation or reflection. It's about whatever works for you. So for me, for instance, I live in the country, I live in the woods outside Halifax. I spend a lot of time out in nature, and that is my way of really engaging in slowing myself down and taking time to reflect. And it's sometimes I may reflect on a particular question, but other times my mind is just open. And I think there are many traditions and cultural practices around the world, both from an African perspective, different concepts like Ubuntu, and then Eastern influences, as I've been talking about Dr. Kumar's work and the great work of Krishnamurti, which there are tons of videos of him speaking on YouTube. So very easy to find Krishnamurti on YouTube and see him actually go through this process of engaging in meditative inquiry. And then indigenous, of course, both South America, North America, in the Arctic Circle, many different types of cultures and approaches to looking at things from a different perspective than our typical Western dualistic process where the mind and body are divided. It's a very intellectual, rational based type of approach. And yet, you know, when we look at other cultures, a lot of what's involved, and again, I'm still learning about this as well. I am not Indigenous. But I did luckily have several people of Indigenous heritage in my PhD cohort, and I continued to look to learn more about, you know, the possibilities. But there's a sense of embodiment, a sense of connection between the mind and the body that I think is much more common in other cultures around the world, that there's a strong sense of, you know, not being part of everything, being connected to everything. And it's ironic in a way that the world of physics is actually more at the leading edge of this, maybe even than the social sciences, although very much posthumanism also gets at this sense of decentering of the human and the idea of the human, you know, we're just, you know, more of a materialist approach, and, you know, us being part of everything and not being, you know, at the apex of things. So that sense of decentering, I think, is very common in many Indigenous cultures. They already know that. We have so much that we could learn from other cultures than the traditions necessarily of the West. I'm not saying throughout the West completely. There are some great ideas. Like I said, the posthumanism is emerging from the French continental experience and theory, but you know, there's so much to learn from other perspectives and other ways of being and knowing the world, beyond what those of us who have been really indoctrinated in some ways in Western culture are not really aware of. And certainly the resurgence and the interest, the growing interest in Canada in Indigenous cultures and in the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a very important part of this.
Thanks, Laurie. You may have noticed that Emmanuel is back. So welcome back, Emmanuel. And you missed some of the praise for your session, because I think when you come back in, you probably can't see the chat. But Alison, you made a comment right at the start, actually, related to the theme that Emmanuel set out of shifting the center of authority and power from which knowledge is generated. Would you like to say anything more about that now Emmanuel's come back?
I'm part of an Ideas Fund programme in the north of Ireland, which involves community organisations working with a researcher, which I think is a particularly Scottish model. But I often find myself in the room with other researchers and community groups who have gone through the academic process of what they call ethics, which I have a big problem with, given that it's dominated by a very big university. So I feel it really resonates with me, the notion of the only piece of research with any authority is that which has spent 6 months going through a university process, by which time it may have narrowed somewhat. And it seems to be very different from my own approach to research, which is based on curiosity and listening. So I wouldn't know 6 months in advance what I want to ask, because I don't know what else I want to ask until I start dialoguing with you. So yeah, thanks for giving it a name. Yeah, it's a big part of what I'm doing at the moment.
I'm pleased that resonated with you, Alison. I'll come to Jim I'll come to Jim now. Jim had asked the question relating it to meditative inquiry, but I think we could maybe ask this to Emmanuel first off, since he hasn't had much chance to respond. Jim, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I'm just struggling to absorb the quite substantial inputs, but where I'm just beginning to work through, for example, in contexts where inequalities and injustice are very prevalent and increasing. For example, life expectancy is going down in one area of northeast of England. How would meditative inquiry inform reflection and the potential action process?
Okay, and I'll just see if Emmanuel would like to answer that. You've heard and you've talked to Laurie about her approach to meditative inquiry. Do you think that would have a role in your work in Ghana? Could you see that that approach working?
Okay, thank you. Yes, you are right. I've had an extensive discussion with Laurie on meditative inquiry. Laurie has given me some material that I've started going through. Yes, I'm a beginner when it comes to the subject or the area of meditative inquiry. I'm a beginner, but I think yes, it seems to me to be a potent tool in trying to change how we do research or how we reshape the narrative. Because, for instance, if I have to do community development research to collect data about a particular community or its dynamics or any section of their population, I cannot just move. It would be wrong for me to just have preconceived notions about what has to be done by who and all that. I need to get there. And like Alison said, it will be wrong for me to, determine whatever or everything in advance. I need to immerse myself in the realities of the local community. I need to be able to identify their aspirations and tailor the research process to their needs and interests. Therefore, I think that meditative inquiry will allow me to immerse myself, to empathize with the stakeholder group that I'm supposed to be dealing with the audience that I'm supposed to be addressing. And then based on that, we will now be able to deal with the engagement issues, which means that the outcome of my meditative inquiry with regards to that context can let me know how to build the right relationships with who, and of course, which role to assign or which role to allow any particular stakeholder to play. Therefore, I believe the little that I have learned about meditative inquiry shows that there is no need for you to adopt, a know-it-all, a very theoretical, approach to the data collection process. Because if it is about community development research, we should have it at the back of our mind that it should result in some action that transforms the lives of these local community people that I'm supposed to be dealing with. But how do we achieve that? Especially in the light of all the political interference, in the light of all the traditional, or conventional wisdom that has not worked, that is not working, that doesn't seem to offer any hope of working. Therefore, if we are to make any difference, then perhaps, if for nothing at all, our curiosity should lead us to give meditative inquiry, a try, because it requires us to empathize with the audience, with the stakeholder, immerse ourselves in their aspirations, and make sure that we tailor the research process to meet their needs and their interests. And what is the result we expect? We expect that the research process based on this approach will galvanize the community members themselves, get them to mobilize themselves and take action based primarily on local assets and local resources, of course, with or perhaps with support from international agencies or from the national government or whatever intervention source. But I think it is something worth trying. And as an emerging area, I think that it is very important that as we try to position the community development practice area, as a discipline, as a professional discipline, we are able to come out with models that are universal but easy to localize. And that was why in my conclusion, I spoke about indigenization. We need to indigenize the scientific process. And I think meditative inquiry may come in handy to some extent. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that comprehensive answer. Laurie, would you like to come back at Jim, who I think was, expressing some skepticism about what can we do by meditating when we're facing huge inequalities?
Yeah, and I would say ditto to everything that Emmanuel said. We've had extensive conversations about this, but also, as I mentioned, I mentioned one example of where we are trying to shift how we do work with the In My Own Voice Arts Association, right, around justice. So the idea, yes, there are, it can be very difficult to engage, especially government and other stakeholders that have significant power, right, in doing things differently and opening them up to engagement in a different way. But I do think that there is what we're doing now, this kind of push process is not always working. So it's a long-term strategy. It's not a short-term strategy. But the idea of a deeper level of engagement with various stakeholders, especially those who hold some power, and resources and so on. This is another approach. This is another idea to try, is to actually engage them in a conversation about what is the topic, what is the problem, what is the goal, what is the aspiration, rather than just trying to push what we want, rather to have a process of co-inquiry. And I love the way the word curiosity is coming up, really trying to provoke people to be curious. And that has to start with ourselves. So meditative inquiry starts with ourselves as community development practitioners, and really understanding where we're coming from, our own motivations, consciousness, and understanding what consciousness is and what influences our consciousness, our motivations, our behavior, was a big part of Krishnamurti's work. And if we don't understand ourselves first and really inquire deeply into our own beliefs and our own ways of thinking, then it's, we're not really engaging or opening up to engagement with others in a deeper way that could actually be transformative. And when we're talking about what we're looking to do here, the idea of meditative inquiry is that it is a transformative approach. It's about mindset, it's about attitudinal learning. And you don't do that by just pushing information at people. You do that by engaging in conversation, in dialogue, and asking questions together, and then exploring and being curious about those questions together. That's when we get real shifts in engagement and in learning together, that are truly transformative and really give us something, have the potential to give us something very new and different in terms of how we go about doing community development and how we engage with others.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come back on that, Jim?
Well, it's quite interesting because in some senses, we're using power very generally here, because power in many situations is about personal wealth creation of those who are affluent. How do we meditate with them about the absence of any dignity, of them receiving high wages when people are starving and dying of hunger? Do we talk about dignity in relation to high wages? Is that happening in your university? Is that on the agenda, I'm saying? So does meditative inquiry produce challenging people, you know, who are quite happy to create their own wealth. Is that okay?
No. And I would say, you know, if you look more at the ideas behind meditative inquiry, which I did put a link into to Dr. Kumar's website in the chat there. But, you know, really meditative inquiry for him is an art of becoming aware, an existential process of asking deep questions about life and our place in it. And yes, there's going to be people who all they care about is themselves. And that may be, you know, that may be, you may or may not shift them. And I would never say meditative inquiry is the only approach to doing community development. I'm positioning it as another approach to explore and to experiment with and to try. And the thing is too, it's another way, if you're not getting any engagement from certain populations or people, especially those with power, with whatever approach you're currently using, this could be another way to try to engage them by asking questions and co-inquiring together. And the other thing I'll mention, a friend of mine exposed me to something called the diffusion of innovation idea. And within the diffusion of innovation, you're going to have early adopters. So people who are more likely to be community minded, whether they have power, wealth, or whatever, there's always a few people, those who are the early adopters, who are the first ones in to help address things. Then there's the next group requires more evidence, and that's the early majority. And they need to see change happening before they'll jump in and add their resources or ideas or get on board, right? And then there's the late majority who, you know, and then there's the laggards. So I think really what we're looking to do here is to try another approach. What I'm proposing is another approach, another tool, not necessarily that this is the way to do things and the only way to do things, but this is another tool, another approach to experiment with.
Thanks. I think people might find it interesting to have a look at the Poverty Truth Commissions, for example, which have operated in the UK. And that was actually a process learned from the Truth Commissions in South Africa. I mean, it had its basis of that, where power changed by that kind of operational kind of process. But anyway, we want to move on. It's a longer debate.
Well, and I think in Canada, you've also had a Truth Commission, haven't you, in terms of looking at Indigenous people's treatment and rights. And I think all these things, they're very interconnected. There's lots of different terms, isn't there, for similar processes, which are about slowing down, about connecting positively and meaningfully with other people and with ourselves and with nature, making those links. And I was also reminded of the concept of healing justice, and the kind of feminist community development approaches have not just been about campaigning, but also, you know, building solidarity, building a movement. So all that capacity building that Emmanuel was talking about needs to start in this way, probably. And I'm just going to go back to Kevin, who's put another piece in the chat about thinking you might try this with some of your community groups. Do you want to comment on that at all, Kevin?
Only in the sense that I think it would be a nice experiment to see if it did actually improve the self-concept and their awareness of their place in the world, in terms of being part of something bigger than themselves, and also how they can play a much more generative role within their own communities. And I said at the end there, it's very similar to Paulo Freire's idea of reflection after action. So you actually learn from the process. It's very much like organizational learning and development, where you can only improve what you do by learning and understanding how you did it, what went wrong, what went well. But we talked about this in a much broader context of understanding your role in society and what if you can maybe do more. maybe how you're doing things is not quite the way that you would like really, but you're just going along with the flow. So I think there are options and opportunities here to explore this much more deeply.
Okay, well, we've got less than 10 minutes left now, and that was to try and pull things together and also to think about how we might want to use the research forum in the future. I think if any of you would like to write in the chat, what have you got out of this session today? So any of your reflections now at the end of this nearly 1 hour and a half of what you've got out of today, and also what might you want to look at in future sessions broadly on the topic of community development research. Do we want to take some of these ideas forward and look a little bit in more depth at them, or has somebody got another topic that you'd either like to present on, or simply have a discussion? We haven't used breakout groups today, but if we had a bigger number, we could and should use breakout groups maybe next time. So any thoughts that you would like to share on this? And I'll warn KK, because I can see you there. You've got your camera on. One of the co-organizers of the Researchers Forum. If you've got any particular ideas, and I think maybe Daniel has gone now. Okay, so KK, would you like to reflect on?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I really learned a lot from Laurie and Emmanuel's presentations. I just think whether it's really the context matter. In my part of the world, we encounter the issues of the power from the funders, and also the funders really determined whether the kind of projects could be supported for research and slow down engagements in different ways. There definitely will be a way we should try, but I just want to see whether people around has any problems or challenge relating to getting funding for a research which has not that sort of which demand long-term development rather than that sort of short-term answer. And also the another issue is about the residents, the community members, whether they have that sort of what we call the required conditions for them to get into that sort of long-term process. In the case of Hong Kong, we always encounter issues about community members refusing to slow down because they really want their material needs to be satisfied. But I definitely know that it's context matters, the projects matters. I want to see whether you have guides here around, and particularly Laurie, you have experience of working with the people under the sort of material deprivations and how to help them to slow down and to get into the whole process. Yeah. My two questions were very confusing, and one suggestion I wonder whether people are interested in exploring is the issues about evaluative research in the community development context. We encounter issues about RCT. Random trial, I even have problems of getting that concept right. When we apply for funding in this part of the world now, the fancy idea is that you have to incorporate that sort of a random trial control methods within your research. Otherwise, it's very difficult for you to get funding, despite the the kind of problems you're working with. It's those communal problems, the macro problems. I wonder whether you have experience, about this sort of challenge, and how you would like to share your experience and to deal with it.
Okay, we haven't got time to answer that question today, but it seems like a great topic for a future session. And I also see Jaya has said, love to hear some practical presentations about people's research, the methods used, the highs, lows, and the outcomes. So just the nuts and bolts of what people have done. So that's also a very open and good suggestion. I think KK's point is, how can we convince funders that participatory research is credible? That was a point that Emmanuel was saying, that this research needs to have the power to influence the policymakers. It needs to influence change, but we want it to be participatory. So that's a key issue for us to look at. I'm just looking to see if there's any more. Laurie, community-based research and the MITAX Pro in Canada has been helpful. Okay. Would anybody in the room now be interested in offering either a short presentation about your research, what you're currently doing, what some of the issues are, the methods, or hosting or facilitating a discussion on a particular topic? If you
Yeah, I don't see anyone jumping forward.
no.
Something that I would be willing to do is to try to facilitate a conversation on exactly the questions that were just raised, because I think they're very important questions around funding for research and how you find the kind of funding that will actually enable you to do things the way you think they need to be done, right? In community development research. But I would welcome working with someone else or a few other people on that. And that would be less about me presenting and more me hosting maybe a conversation or a dialogue and co-inquiring together on this question. But if someone else wants to come forward to do something too, that would be most appreciated.
I'm sure there's some people in this room who've managed to get funding to do the research that they wanted to do and felt was valuable. Sometimes you can do that without any funding, and that means you've got nobody to be answerable to. But sometimes these days in some parts of the world, the funding bodies are quite open to participatory research, but you have to be careful not to be incorporated into their institutions and structures. And so I think that is an interesting challenge. For me, I see quite an issue in the UK, because participatory research is thought to have a good impact. It's thought to be a good thing to engage people who have lived experience of the issue in doing research. But is that dangerous because we're starting to sort of mainstream it? It's becoming the norm, and the academics who get involved aren't necessarily aware of their own power and all the ethical issues involved. So we may get bad types of participatory research. It isn't always a good. So I'm sure there's a lot of debate that we could have in that area. Is anybody else willing to join with Laurie just to plan a session for our next
Since Laurie and I delivered today's session, I'll be willing to work hand in hand with her to see to the moderation or facilitation of a future discussion. I'll be very happy to do that, to throw more clarity on some of the gray areas, and also to deal more effectively with some of the issues that have been raised. And of course, for want of time, we could not delve into all the details, but another opportunity may give us another window to showcase more of what needs to be brought to the fore. So I'll be happy to work with Laurie on that. Thank you.
Excellent. So Lauren, Emmanuel, you're really playing a great role here. You may turn into the facilitators of this group for longer than you'd hoped. So maybe if you have a chat and come up with a title. Martin, you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I must say it has been a lovely presentation from Lauren and then Emmanuel. Whilst I was quietly listening, I just took a reflection on my current project community work that I'm doing with Core Africa. And Core Africa basically recruits young graduates who are into development work from diverse backgrounds, train them and then deploy them into communities, remote, impoverished communities to facilitate development. And through all the tools and the approaches that we use in Core Africa, it has to do with more of empathizing, putting yourselves into the shoes of the people, understanding the mindset of the people. They are clearly aware of their conditions, their challenges. They are fully aware of their resources. But the question there is, what is it that is not driving the focus for them to channel it into to progressive socio-economic development? And having to be with my community over there over the past 6 months now, I am intrigued about the mindset of the people, which has made my mind to be pondering a lot on how can practitioners basically take into consideration the diverse mindsets of the people in communities that we engage, even in research. So one of our approaches has to do with, you have to first integrate with the people. So in the process of integration, you basically get to do everything. You listen a lot more than you ask. So whilst you are listening, you are able to observe, and in your observation, you are able to gather a lot of data and information without the people even speaking to you. So I kind of want to align Lauren's approach, which is a very good approach, and I think maybe she probably has to dig deep. And that is where Emmanuel's presentation has to come in with the whole lot of research. Research gives us information, and information gives us data that we can be able to work with as practitioners and to be able to determine the extent to which communities change, not necessarily physically, but the mindsets of the community. When the mindset is able to be aligned to understand what they can do with themselves, it brings sustainability. So participatory plays a very key role, where I agree with me by saying that bottom up is very, very good, where you just facilitate the people to do their own thing. Sit with them. What we call the meeting and the mango tree, where usually, in communities, women and various stakeholders groups, what their usual meeting point is under the tree. So in Core Africa, we have a tool, meeting and the mango tree, where you get to engage with the community people. You do what they do. Like I said, you observe and you listen. So through observation, we have data collections that we do, and you basically don't have to ask them to get the data, because you have done a lot of observation and notes jotting, where you put down key figures. So I think Lauren and me's presentation plays a very key role with the research work, and then what we should be able to do as practitioners, because we need data to really deliver the impact that we want to see communities do, and not only the impact, but practitioners' capacities are enhanced to move along the dynamism of change in a community development way. So thank you very much. But I would love to also share my practical experience on the field work with Lauren and then me, for them to enhance their approaches. So thank you very much.
Martin, would you mind if you're willing to put your email address in the chat, if you're willing to do that. If you want it to be private, you can just send it to me. Then maybe I can connect you with Laurie and Emmanuel. If you would like to join in for the next session, I think that would be really very, very interesting.
Yes, I would love to do. I would basically do that. But I want to quickly ask, when will the next session be? I don't know, because
this is our final thing. I'm sorry, folks, we are overrunning. So the final thing to decide is our next session. And Anna Clark suggested it shouldn't be before September. So I'm looking at mid-September. So we have a break for a while, and we meet again mid-September. Today's a Monday. That doesn't mean to say Monday is always a good day, but we could have something like Monday the 18th of September, a long way away, but how does that seem for the people who are here, or another day that week? does that fit with Laurie and Emmanuel? Is the big
Yes,
question.
it's okay for me. It's okay for me.
Yeah, and Martin, have you got, whether you've got your calendar there? Monday the 18th of September.
Come again. When is the date?
Monday the 18th of September.
Oh, that's perfect with me.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
okay.
Well, let's pencil that in our diaries or type it into our phones or whatever, that would be the next meeting. Very hard to get a time that fits across the world. So it's tempting just to have it at this time, but I know it cuts some people out in Australia and across the west coast of the Americas. But for now, I think we'll stick with this time, which is 2 p.m. BST, but I'm willing to be lobbied by other people to change the time. And if you want to suggest any further topics, you've got the IACD email, which is Jessica's email. Please make contact with Jessica and she'll pass us on information, but otherwise we will look forward to seeing some of you, I hope, on Monday the 18th of September. And thank you so much to Emmanuel and Laurie. You've really stimulated a great discussion. It shows that we've gone over time because we're all so engaged with this. So thank you very, very much indeed. And thank you to you, all the participants. You've been very, very good in doing this. And I think we can turn off the recording now and say goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day or night or whatever it is.